Hi everybody. I'm in my home studio today and I've had a lot of requests lately to paint backlit clouds. And so if you haven't ever been here before, by the way, my name is Barbie and I like to paint nature's beauty in water media. So join me and watch me paint this today in watercolor. The first thing I do is cut my paper to the right size, and I decide ahead of time on the size that I want my image to be. And so I wanted this to be a 5x7 because that's a really popular size for a card, or you can find a mat that's cut for a 5x7 opening. And so I just cut some paper. Um, I found the middle of each side and then measured a little bit bigger than a 5x7, because what you want it to do is, if you have a mat, you want it to go under the mat. You want the image to go under the mat. And so, and to have a little bit of margin around it so it'll lay flat. So I did that. And now what I want to show you is a little bit about color. In painting a sky like this, there's several colors of blue, and there's some grays and even some reds and some burnt sienna in here. And so what I've done to show you here is the difference in these kinds of blues, like a cobalt blue, a French ultramarine, phthalo blue, green shade. And see, the way the watercolor works is that the more pigment you use and less water, it's darker, and the more water you add, it's lighter. And so you can see a difference here in how light that it can get. This is a Payne's gray that I really like. Is a Winsor & Newton Payne's gray, and it lightens up kind of like the inside of the gray on these clouds. But if it's not exact, what I do is I either add a little bit of alizarin crimson to the Payne's gray, or I used this French ultramarine and added a little bit of burnt sienna. And I don't have a burnt sienna out here, but this seems like it would not work, but this is actually a burnt sienna. And this is a way that you can make a dark, where you're adding a blue and the burnt sienna, and you get anywhere from a brown to a grayish color. And you can make your blacks this way too. So now that you see the colors, what I've done is I've taken my palette right here, and I don't have a really pretty palette because I like to paint more than I like to clean it up, but I've mixed up some of the paints. I make large puddles. You want to have enough puddles of paint on there and not run out while you're painting something. And so before I do that, I like to draw out a little bit of my shape right here. And I'm going to get a pencil. The first thing I always do is find the horizon in my paintings. And even though this is not a straight horizon, it actually includes a parking lot. I don't want the parking lot in my painting, although, I mean, there's times when you might want to include that. But so I just drew a straight line. I came down low enough because I want this to be more about the sky, like a skyscape, than I want it to be about the land here. So once I've drawn the line, I take my pencil and I just lightly find where these clouds are. And you don't have to do that if you just like painting, drawing with your paint. You can do that, but this will give you some idea of maybe where the clouds are going and where you can put down the paint. So I'm going to do that for a minute. And I want there to be sort of a trail like this that leads your eye all the way up. Notice how the clouds at the top are large because they're closer to you. The clouds in the back are smaller. And so we'll convey that with our drawing. Now I've lightly drawn a few cloud shapes here that you can barely see. If they're ever too dark, you can use something called a kneaded eraser. It's like silly putty that I used to play with when I was little. That tells you my age. And you can just lightly take up the pencil marks. And you can also do that after it's painted and it's really dry too. So remember kneaded erasers, because they don't leave little fuzzy things all over the place. So I'm going to take out the paint now, And before I paint, I'm going to lightly wet the surface. You can use any kind of brush. I just use a big fluffy brush and put a little bit of water on it and let it start soaking in, so that when you put the paint down, it's not going to look hard. It's not going to have really hard edges because some of the paint will bleed. And you may have to go back and re-wet the paint, the paper every once in a while, because depends on the humidity in your house, if it's soaking up fast or not. So this is just damp now, and I'm going to take a brush. You can use a round brush, an oval, wash brush. I like this quill brush that's by Princeton Neptune, and I also have a smaller version of a round brush. I also love my old white sable Robert Simmons brushes. And so whatever you feel like you're in control with, try that first. And so I'm going to take the old Robert Simmons brush, and a lot of times skies are darker at the top and lighter as they go down toward the horizon. But the first thing you need to ask is, what time of day is it, and where is the light source? And so this time of day was probably around 8 o'clock the other night when I took this. And so the sun is starting to go down, but it's lighting up the edges of these clouds right here. And but it is lighter towards the horizon and still slightly darker as you go up toward the top. So you can choose, any kind of blue that you think will match that. I like cobalt blue, and then using a little bit of the phthalo blue green shade toward the bottom. And so let's just get started right here. And if it's too dark, we can take a tissue and blot it. Tissues are our best friend when painting clouds. And see how that just lightly bleeds up in there? I can just put a little bit in here, some touches, and it's already starting to form the shapes of the clouds here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. It's already drying so fast in here because I have on the air conditioner. It's been really hot here lately. So, and it's okay if there's a little bit of pale color in here while I'm trying to figure out different shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll put a little bit more of this blue color in here as we go. Oops. Paint is drying too. Now that is a little bit too dark. And so I'm going to change the color to the phthalo blue green shade, which is a little bit lighter as it goes down. And here, let's put some of this up in here. And I'm going to go ahead and go all the way down to the horizon with it so you can see. Now I have the first few little areas of blue on here. And what I'm going to do is re-wet the inside of the bigger shapes and start putting in some blues and grays. So I'm using a combination of the colors. I'm using a little bit of the alizarin crimson with some of the French ultramarine, and I'm also using Payne's gray with burnt sienna. So I can vary the colors a little bit, and I think that's a little bit too purple, but while it's still wet, you can easily pick things up. So I'm going to do a little bit more of the Payne's gray. And see, you can tell when it's not wet enough because it starts making these hard lines. And so I'm going to re-wet this with my brush while I do this and try to save some of the, save some of the little white places on the edges of the clouds. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that, and this is basically how I do it. I just put the color in and I lift it back up, and I put more color in and I lift more back up. So I'll get some of that done. At this point, I've added paint in all of the areas, and some of it's dried a little bit hard. So what I'm going to do is when I have hard edges and I want to soften them up to make them look like the soft wispy clouds, I don't have a fancy scrubber. I just use a synthetic flat brush, and I use the end of it and wet it and then wipe it off a little bit, and then just start working the edges like this, where it will start softening them up a little bit. And if the paint isn't too staining, you'll be able to soften those areas. Like some of this right in here, I can soften up. And then I also have a Q-tip, and sometimes Q-tips can help with the edges too. And so that seems to be something that people ask about all the time. How do you make them look soft? I mean, some people's style, you know, they don't even need to make them look soft as long as the light is in the right places. But there's going to be times when you're going to want to pick up some of the paint. And I could have made it a little bit lighter in there, but remember, when you're painting, nobody's going to have the photograph right next to them. And you don't want your painting to look exactly like your photo anyway, because you want it to look painterly, right? So that's the kind of thing I'm going to do over the whole thing. And just if you would like to see how I would finish up some trees in here for the tree line, I like to take opposite colors. And since we already used a little bit of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and it has those colors in here, I'm going to mix the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna to make a dark brown. And see, this is what this looks like mixed. Here, I'll go ahead and do like that. That's ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And so you can either, you know, re-wet it and make it even darker. Let's see if I can put some more. See, and that starts looking like silhouetted trees in there. I can just go like this. And you can vary the colors to make it look maybe like it has light hitting it. So that is looking more like Payne's Gray, and that is perfectly okay. I just tend to like to mix my darks for things like this. And one of the prettiest darks that I make is with phthalo green, believe it or not, and alizarin crimson, and that makes a beautiful black. And people always ask, well, why don't you just use lamp black or ivory black or something? And I think that it has more dimension when it has more colors like this. Like, it might look like some of it's lighter and some of it's darker. And so this is how I do my silhouetted tree lines. And just to show you one more thing on that, here we go. You could put phthalo green. I'm going to show you what the phthalo green mixture looks like. That's that bright green. Some people say, oh, that's the most obnoxious green. Why do you use that? Well, see, look at this alizarin with this right here. Okay, so they're opposites, but when you put them together, look at this color that it gets. You can either get black, or you can get more of a plum color, or a phthalo green, you know, I mean a forest green color. So, I mean, you could even stick some of that in there right now. And you can't really tell with this, but if I did the whole thing, you could really tell. But this is all I'm going to do today. I'll work on the reflection another time, but this is to show you a little bit about how I start on skies. So like and subscribe, and if you want more videos like this, just come on over to my channel. Bye-bye.